He dismembered the killer with his own hands, yet he turned himself into the police. This revenge, prepared for 10 years, had only just begun. Clyde was an ordinary engineer with a warm family, but his happiness ended in an instant when 2 robbers broke into his home. His wife, hearing the noise, had just stepped out when one of the robbers pushed her down. Helpless, she could only watch as her husband was stabbed. Seeing his partner act so viciously, even though they had agreed to only steal money, but now had caused deaths, the young man panicked and urged his accomplice to leave quickly. But unexpectedly, he yanked down Clyde's wife's pants, planning to satisfy himself before leaving. Clyde, stabbed and tied up, roared in agony as he watched his beloved being violated, yet he was powerless. At that moment, their 6-year-old daughter came out of her room.
Kids like me.
Clyde fainted. His wife and daughter were killed, and only he survived by chance. He thought the justice system would give him fairness, so he confidently handed the prosecutor a carefully prepared testimony. But Nick questioned him instead.
Do you trust me, Clyde?
Yeah, of course.
The reason Nick asked was because what came next would crush Clyde's hope. Nick explained that the man who violated his wife would testify, Ames would be sentenced to death, while Darby would only face a murder charge and serve 5 years. Clyde couldn't understand. Darby was the ringleader. He killed his wife and daughter and assaulted them, while Ames was only an accomplice. So why did the most guilty man receive the lighter sentence? Nick explained that the judge had thrown out Darby's DNA evidence because his lawyer exploited a loophole in the law. Even though Clyde said he had seen Darby's face, his testimony wasn't credible since he was half unconscious at the time. Nick urged him that the best outcome now was to turn the ringleader Darby into a cooperating witness who would identify the accomplice Ames. Because the case had so many holes it could be easily dismantled by the defense. The timeline would stretch out, and in the end, it might fail.
How could you do that?
This is just how the justice system works.
At that moment, Clyde realized the law was dead, and the only one he could rely on was himself. Nick chose the safer option because he prided himself on a 96% conviction rate, and in order to protect his record, he made a deal with the ringleader. This scene was witnessed by Clyde passing by. The prosecutor's photo with the man who destroyed his family would become the driving force of his 10-year revenge. 10 years later, it was the day of Ames's execution, but the injection meant to be painless left him dying in agony. It was clear the drug had been swapped, and on the package was written, "You can't fight fate," the very words Darby had said to Clyde 10 years ago. Nick realized Darby might be in danger, so he rushed to his place with the police. Meanwhile, Darby received an anonymous call. The caller described the objects around him in detail, then warned that police were coming, saying, "If you don't want to end up in prison, do exactly as I say." Darby looked out the window and indeed saw police downstairs. He quickly grabbed his gun and fired at the patrol car, then threw his weapon away as instructed. He approached a police car parked by the roadside, took the officer's gun while he had the chance, and then threatened the officer to drive quickly. The officer drove him to a desolate place, and just as Darby prepared to execute him, his phone rang again.
You know why I'll never see my wife and little girl again?
'Cause you took them from me.
It turned out the officer was Clyde. Darby tried to fire, but his body had already been poisoned. The gun was coated with toxin. He could feel the pain but couldn't move. This was Clyde's first step of revenge. He brought Darby to an abandoned factory and injected him with a drug that kept him conscious.
I know what it feels like to be helpless. Just like when I watched you slaughter my whole family. Now you can't fight fate.
Not only that, Clyde placed a mirror above him, forcing him to watch every detail of his own dismemberment. Clyde put on a mask and turned on the camera. Afterward, Clyde released the officer, ensuring they would discover Darby's body. He returned home, stripped off his bloody clothes, and waited calmly for the police. From this moment on, Clyde had officially declared war on the justice system. The police searched Clyde's home and found his shelves filled with books about law. Clearly, Clyde knew the justice system inside out. And from now on, every move they made would be within Clyde's plan. That same day, while Clyde was in prison, Nick's daughter received a disc. She thought it was her dance recording, but when she played it, it was the video of Darby's brutal death, leaving her deeply traumatized. Nick interrogated Clyde, asking if he had killed Ames and Darby. Clyde's answers were always, "I wanted to. I planned to." But he never once said, "I did it." Nick ignored this detail, believing he had enough to convict him.
Counselor.
We're done here. We have your confession.
I don't think so. Let's think back. What did I say? That I wanted to kill Clarence Darby? Yeah, sure. What father wouldn't?
Seeing this, Nick sat down to negotiate. Clyde made a demand. He only wanted a bed, and everyone thought it was absurd, wondering if he had lost his mind. Nick didn't bother to play along with his madness and was about to leave. At that moment, he received a call from home and learned that Clyde had mailed the video of Darby's dismemberment to his house. Since Clyde wore a mask in the footage, there was no direct proof it was him. To prevent Clyde from causing more chaos, Cantrell granted his request, giving him a luxury mattress. But this infuriated the other inmates. Clyde politely thanked Cantrell, which only enraged him further, because Clyde's mockery had humiliated them.
Nice bed.
Thank you.
I watch my fucking back around here.
At his first hearing, the prosecution demanded that Clyde's bail be denied. Clyde refused a lawyer and chose to defend himself. He first claimed he was a law-abiding citizen, an ordinary man, and that the prosecution had no evidence. Then he cited a case similar to his own and even quoted the exact file number. After hearing Clyde's legal argument, the judge considered releasing him.
Thank you.
No, I don't think I will excuse you.
Excuse me?
You see, this is what I'm talking about. You were about to let me go. Are you kidding me? This is why we're here in the first place. How misguided are you? I feed you a couple of bullshit legal precedents.
But Clyde never intended to leave, because his revenge would be carried out from inside the prison. He made a second demand. He specified a restaurant, demanded a medium-rare steak delivered to his cell at exactly 1 o'clock, not a second late, and also asked for his iPod, because he liked to eat while listening to music.
When negotiating, Clyde, you gotta have something to bargain with.
Would the life of Bill Reynolds suffice?
Bill Reynolds was Darby's defense lawyer. Through his wife, the prosecution learned Bill had been missing for 3 days.
I got something to bargain with after all, Nick. At the moment, Bill Reynolds is still alive.
Now Clyde had leverage, forcing the prosecution to agree. The steak was delivered to the prison, and Cantrell, worried about tricks, had both the food and delivery man thoroughly inspected to ensure no threat got inside. As the lavish meal was carried past the cells, it instantly stirred anger among the inmates. Clyde asked Cantrell for the time. Cantrell casually replied, 1 o'clock sharp, but Clyde didn't believe him and turned to Nick for confirmation. Clyde revealed Bill's coordinates. With time running out, they boarded a helicopter and headed to the destination, and sure enough, they found Bill's briefcase. Nick guessed that Bill might be buried right beneath, and he dug frantically. But it was still too late. Because Cantrell failed to keep to the time, Bill had taken his last breath just 8 minutes earlier. Meanwhile, in the cell, Clyde shared the steak with his cellmate, but the man didn't know it was meant to be his last meal. Clyde split the steak in two, keeping the portion with the bone for himself. This was why Clyde demanded a medium-rare steak. At this doneness, the bone had just the right hardness. The cellmate's death wasn't accidental either. He was Clyde's target because back in his hometown, he had harmed several girls. After killing him, Clyde calmly lay down on his bed, waiting for the guards to arrive. This way, Clyde was transferred to solitary confinement, and this was part of his plan. Nick came to the isolation cell, hoping to move Clyde by speaking about the death of his wife and daughter.
You think your wife and daughter would feel good about you killing in their name?
My wife and daughter can't feel anything.
Nick kept asking himself, why was he always a step behind Clyde? To help him, Cantrell introduced him to someone special, a former spy, Bray, who had once been Clyde's partner. Bray revealed that Clyde had been a spy too, not just any spy, but one at the highest level. Once, when they had to eliminate a particularly difficult target, they used cruise missiles, fighter jets, even bombers to level his village, yet they couldn't kill him. So they called Clyde, who invented a device using bulletproof fibers and carbon fiber gears hidden inside a necktie. 2 days later, when the target's wife came home, she found him suffocated to death on the bathroom floor. Bray warned them, if Clyde wants someone dead, that person will die. Cantrell added that Clyde was already in a maximum security cell, incapable of doing anything.
So what are you saying? You saying we can't stop him?
Walk into his cell and put a bullet in his head. Aside from that, no, you can't stop him. If Clyde wants you dead, you're dead.
But Nick and Cantrell didn't believe he could act alone. They thought he must have an accomplice, so they went to a judge to request an order preventing Clyde from contacting anyone. Even though this violated prisoner rights, the judge carelessly agreed.
Hello?
An angry Nick went to the prison, demanding to know what it would take for Clyde to stop.
Vengeance.
Clyde replied that if he had wanted revenge, he could have killed Nick's family 10 years ago. What he truly wanted was to topple the broken justice system. Clyde still had some faith in Nick, so he gave him one last chance, laying out his third demand. Release him at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning and drop all charges, otherwise everyone would die. Nick wasn't intimidated. He tightened Clyde's security, had his assistant identify all possible inmates connected to him, and ordered every justice official to work inside the prison, determined to see if his threat was real at 6 o'clock. Time ticked by and everyone stared at the clock. Nick told everyone to go home, and just as they drove off, police later discovered remote-controlled bombs hidden in their fuel tanks, placed in a spot easily overlooked. Worried for his family, Nick sent his wife and daughter away. He deliberately brought Clyde out for fresh air, but in his fury he punched him repeatedly. Dunnigan aimed a gun at Clyde's head, intending to execute him quietly, but Nick stopped him. Days later, after attending a colleague's funeral, Nick and his team prepared to return. At that moment, a mysterious man was watching them closely, operating a heavily armed robot. When the convoy reached the predetermined location, the robot activated a signal jammer, cutting power to all vehicles. Nick instructed the team to escort Cantrell back first. The car had barely moved a few meters when machine guns unleashed a wild barrage, followed by a shell that caused Cantrell's vehicle to explode violently. The mayor, upon hearing the news, furiously blamed Nick, announcing on the spot that he would be dismissed. But later the mayor calmed down, and instead of removing Nick from his post, she not only allowed him to stay in his position, but even promoted him to take over Cantrell's role. The explosions stirred panic. Adults were afraid to go to work, children afraid to go to school. The mayor ordered the city sealed off, police to patrol 24 hours, and helicopters to circle the skies. As Nick puzzled over what to do, he made a discovery. Among Clyde's properties, one was near the prison. Nick brought Dunnigan to the location, and sure enough, they found a tunnel entrance beneath a car. The two followed the tunnel, and inside were not only weapons and ammunition, but also uniforms for various professions. Dunnigan shined his flashlight upward and discovered that Clyde had dug passages connecting to every single cell. He climbed up a ladder, carefully turned a wheel, and pushed it open, only to find that Clyde was not there. At that moment, Nick realized the truth. Clyde had done everything on his own. He had no accomplices. Meanwhile, Clyde had already disguised himself as a janitor and slipped into City Hall. Today, the mayor was organizing a meeting there with all judicial departments to discuss how to handle the major problem that was Clyde.
Just get him out of here by tomorrow.
On the other side, Nick discovered surveillance equipment in the tunnel, and one of the feeds was showing City Hall. Nick realized that Clyde's target tonight was the mayor and government officials, so he immediately drove there and alerted the SWAT team to prepare. By the time they arrived, Clyde had already planted the bomb and left. When Clyde returned to his warehouse, police who were staking it out tipped Nick off. As Clyde came back to prison, Nick suddenly appeared. Nick told him that all of this so-called revenge was nothing more than drowning himself in the pain of destroying his daughter's memory, that this was not vengeance, it was self-deception. These words pierced Clyde deeply, leaving him unable to argue back. But no matter what, he still wanted to complete the final step. Clyde took out a phone, ready to detonate the bombs at City Hall. Nick warned him that if he did, it would cost him his life. In the end, Clyde pressed the button anyway. Nick slammed the cell door shut and sealed off the tunnel entrance, because the bomb at City Hall had already been dismantled, and it was placed beneath Clyde's bed. At the very end, the bomb seemed to explode, but whether Clyde truly died was left unknown. This was the director's cliffhanger for the audience. Law-abiding citizen is far more profound than an ordinary revenge film. Clyde was not a demon addicted to killing, but a tragic hero forced into a desperate corner by fate. Behind his cruelty was the despair of losing his loved ones and being wounded again by a failed justice system. His insane plan was in fact an accusation against the distortion of procedural justice, and Nick's transformation reflected the struggles of real-world legal workers. When justice becomes a numbers game, has humanity already been devoured by the system? In the closing scene, Clyde's faint smile as he stared at his daughter's bracelet in the flames left countless viewers in tears. He had never intended to survive. He only wanted to use his death to awaken justice. This was not just a movie, but a mirror. When the law can no longer protect its people, can the people still obey the law? Perhaps true obedience to the law is not blind submission to rules, but the protection of justice itself.